sometimes we are making critiques of artists, though we're making valid critiques in cases, we're making critiques of artists, profiteers, opportunists within the culture who are using racial stereotypes and tropes and who are benefiting from it in that way. However, we really have to step back and think, how deep does this really go? And does the issue start with these people mocking or mimicking or stereotype or capitalizing on stereotypes? Or is it the fact that there's a market for them to do it? And not just that, a market that's demanding and looking for that kind of content. Something needs to be said about commercialization of the culture and what it's led to in respect to the lack of respect and reverence from those who participate in it, including but not limited to non-Black participants and profiteers of the culture. Welcome back to No Ghostwriter. I'm your host, Blessing Mukosha. Make sure that you follow no_ghostwriter on Twitter and Instagram and No Ghostwriter on TikTok, where we're breaking down rap for the rappers and putting you onto the best independent, authentic, and underground hip hop. So if you don't want to miss that, then make sure you follow us and like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe if you like what I'm talking about today. So today we're going to be having an exploration and critical discussion around race, blackfishing, and racial ambiguity in rap and hip hop music and culture. This is a very timely conversation for multiple reasons. First of all, at the time of recording, it's currently UK Black History Month. And if you hadn't judged by the accent, I live in London in the UK. So we're really thinking about and celebrating and recognizing Black voices and contributions to our culture and history. And of course, rap and hip hop culture is tied within that. And then another reason this is timely is that this has come up in relation to a former British girl band member, Jesy Nelson, who released her debut single with Nicki Minaj, Bad Boy. I've actually done a reaction to Boyz on the channel, and I've done a Pen Talk episode where we break down Nicki's verse. And there's been a lot of controversy and backlash towards Jesy and Nicki as well for defending Jesy against alleged blackfishing. So because of all of that, it's worthwhile that we have this conversation. And I, for a while, have, been paying attention to these kinds of conversations. I've seen when they've arisen in the past. And I think now is as good time as any to really have a discussion on race, blackfishing, racial ambiguity, and all of these issues within rap and hip hop culture. So if you're interested in seeing my thoughts on that, then stick around and keep watching this video. So something that's quite obvious, but I thought is nevertheless worthwhile addressing at the start of this video or any kind of video on this subject, and that is that the origins of rap and hip hop music and culture is a distinctively Black cultural history. And so in all of its forms, rhythmic and lyrical spoken word poetry is present within most cultures and traditions that trace back to Black African lineage. And rap and hip hop culture, as it encompasses fashion, music, art, and dance, is now in 2021 a multi-billion-dollar industry. And because of that, those presenting and profiting from the culture in 2021 are not always from a direct Black African descent or background. So now that there is so much money to be made from this culture, preservation of it is both a hot topic and also a fundamental issue within the culture alongside its perceived lack of integrity as a result of its commercialization and the diverse range of people that you have participating and profiting from the culture. I wanted to link here to some content I made with Bobby Foster, who is another great music and pop culture commentator on YouTube. You should check out his channel and join his community, Foster the Knowledge. We had a conversation about about commercialization of hip-hop culture and sort of the impacts and ways that it's affected the climate and the industry. So check that out if you're interested. So of course, as the culture self-interrogates and challenges itself over and over again in different eras around integrity and doing it for the culture and preserving and protecting the culture. And so because we're going to be making reference to a lot of sociological and colloquial terminology around race and racial performance and performance of race in this video, I've made a helpful glossary that should help you navigate these topics. Let's address some of the key and relevant terms and definitions that we'll be using throughout this video. Blackfishing. Blackfishing emerged to prominence as a term in 2018 and is used to describe the practice of adopting and co-opting signifiers of blackness to make oneself appear black. Since the term was coined following a Twitter thread calling out examples of white women cosplaying as women of color, a number of high-profile white musicians have been accused of blackfishing, particularly those operating in the genres of hip-hop, R&B, rap, and grime. British musician Rita Ora has previously been accused of blackfishing, as well as Australian rapper Iggy Azalea and Miley Cyrus, with the female music stars said to have adopted extreme skin tanning, hairstyles, and mannerisms to imply black cultural heritage. Racial ambiguity. Racial ambiguity is the term for when a person's racial background isn't easily identifiable. They don't appear to be what's commonly called monoracial, or being of one race. If a person appears to be racially ambiguous, you might think that they're mixed race, also known as multiracial, but not be able to tell which races are included in their background. A racially ambiguous person may be perceived differently by different people. Depending on their skin coloring and other physical features, a racially ambiguous person might be perceived as white by one person, but as a person of color by another. Race baiting. The unfair use of statements about race to try and influence the actions and attitudes of a particular group of people. Desirability/pretty privilege. Beauty standards are fluctuating ideals with extremely narrow criteria, ensuring that only a few can actually attain them. Those who happen to meet these standards often experience social advantages and better treatment by those who perceive them as attractive. These unearned benefits were defined by psychology researchers as a beauty premium, but are more commonly referred to today as pretty privilege. Essentially, unattractive people experience significant disadvantages in comparison to attractive people. In fact, they describe these disparities as comparable to the income gap between genders or ethnicities. In the end, someone is receiving unearned benefits as a result of their physical experience. So now that we've introduced the topic and talked about some of these just background core definitions and some of the background of the traditions and history of the culture and the fact that the culture is now diversely presented and profited from, it's time to move on to the discussion on these subjects. And I've divided my thoughts on this into two parts. I've done part 1 and part 2. So make sure you stick around and listen to both, and then join me for the conclusion at the end. And then of course, get into those comments and share your thoughts. And I will ask throughout this video, and at the end, I'll say it again, it's okay for us to have different opinions on this. At the end of the day, this culture is a shared culture and all of us have independent and unique lives. So we're all gonna take different positions on the same matters, but it doesn't matter if your opinion is different. We can still be respectful and kind towards each other, even if, you know, we're acting better than others are acting towards us. We can still, you know, be the bigger person, and it's really important that we have these conversations. So please show in the comments that, you know, you can respect that and these conversations are worthwhile having. So I wanted to open up this discussion by talking about the first element of all of this issue around race baiting and blackfishing in the culture, and really get into it as at its core being about fraudulent sale and misrepresentation of black culture and expression. So if rap culture is representative of the Black voice and experience, as I set out in the beginning on the origins of rap and hip hop culture and music, how then does its consumption by non-Black people affect how it should be, or how we think it should be aesthetically presented? So why I say that, because now that there are more and more different people who are, participating, presenting, profiting from rap and hip hop culture in all of its forms, does that necessarily mean that there needs to be an agreed or an established consensus around how we should present the culture, since this culture is inherently rooted in Black expression and experience and voice? So following on from that, if the issue is deciding how we preserve the culture through its aesthetic presentation, or preservation of Black culture through how it's appreciated, consumed, and sold, then doesn't this go beyond just who looks Black and more into how the culture itself is preserving itself? So is the problem non-Black people participating in the culture, or is the problem, as I suggested, where they do so but do so fraudulently? And if it is participating in the culture fraudulently that's really an issue here around this conversation of race baiting and blackfishing in the culture, then, in my view, the issue begins and ends at ghostwriting. Hear me out. When the culture self-preserves its own integrity by demanding that those who spit it wrote it, it will suffer less from the issues and frustration and misrepresentation that people feel from blackfishing, racial cosplay, and all of that other stuff. And it would attract only thoughtful and respectful artists of fans of any race. And my examples here are Eminem and Mac Miller. One of the reasons I believe that these two rappers, although not being Black, are revered and respected and cherished by all of those who appreciate the culture is because of the fact that they have respected it at all times. They didn't come into the culture, not writing their own raps, not knowing the history, not knowing who the greats are, not knowing who paved the way. Actually, quite the opposite. And so in doing so, they showed respect and reverence for the culture, and at no point have I ever really seen anyone accuse these two artists of blackfishing, of race baiting, of racial cosplay, even though they are considered some of the best, if not one of the best lyricists of all time. So how is it then that we are able to have people who aren't Black in the culture that don't cause this friction? And my view is that it comes down to ghostwriting and emphasis on rap skill and ability. Because if that is really at the core of the culture, then, as I'll go on to say, because of the next reasons, there won't be the same incentive to allow anything to slide, including blackfishing, race baiting, and so on, because the culture is self-preserving itself.
From Erica from the Bronx. Hey, Eminem. Hey, Eminem.
Word up.
My question is, how do you think the rap game would be today if rappers like Biggie, Pac, Big Pun, Easy was still alive today? Would it be better or worse than it is today?
That's a tough question, because, they were definitely a big influence on a lot of rappers today, including myself, So I can't speak for every other rapper, but I'm sure if they were alive today, they'd still be putting out crazy albums. At the same time that their music, is immortal. So, true that. The hip-hop world should succeed and expand, and it's always forever growing. It's like a tree. It's like the hair on my weenie. You know what I mean? And when you have a big weenie, then it's definitely inevitable that it is very hairy.
I want to really clarify here that, in my view, if the culture continues to prioritize selling itself to the highest bidder, like I talked about in my videos with Bobby Foster, it's ironic then to call out anyone non-black from profiting from it in an allegedly fraudulent way. I think that in order for us to sustain our criticism, if we have any, towards people who we believe are fraudulently participating in the culture, who are playing with race in a way that's offensive, who are, capitalizing on stereotypes and tropes around black people and culture and rap and hip hop music and culture. In order for us to really sustain any critiques we have of that, in my view, it begins and ends at how we respond to the commercialization of hip hop. So MF Doom was famous for always appearing with his mask. He was the masked villain. And one of the reasons why he put that mask on was because in the early stages of his rap career and his journey in hip hop, he realized that the commercialization of rap and hip hop music and culture meant that more and more was about the aesthetic, about the image, about the presentation. And in protest against that and to challenge that, he removed his face from the equation.
Yeah, the whole mask thing, really, all right, it's a time in hip hop where things, from my point of view, started going more to what things look like opposed to what things sound like. You know what I mean? Before, we ain't know what MCs look like until we went to the party and seen them rocking, you know what I'm saying? Or seen them, most of the time you see them rocking at a show before you even knew, you know what I'm saying? Straight skills. See, once it started getting more publicized and, it started being, hip-hop started being more of a money-making thing, then you get these corporate ideas where you want to put what it looks like to sell what it sounds like. But we dealing with music, so the mask really represents the whole, to rebel against the trying to sell the product as a human being, you know what I mean? Villain represents anybody. Anybody in here could wear the mask and be a villain. Male, female, any race, so-called race, you know what I mean? It's about where you coming from your heart, you know what I'm saying? Like, what is the message? What you got to say? You know what I mean? So that's mainly why I chose to bring the mask into the fold.
Now, that is a way that you really take a stand against commercialization in hip-hop. Sometimes we are making critiques of artists, though we're making valid critiques in cases, we're making critiques of artists, profiteers, opportunists within the culture who are using racial stereotypes and tropes and who are benefiting from it in that way. However, we really have to step back and think, how deep does this really go? And does the issue start with these people mocking or mimicking or stereotype or capitalizing on stereotypes? Or is it the fact that there's a market for them to do it? And not just that, a market that's demanding and looking for that kind of content. Something needs to be said about commercialization of the culture and what it's led to in respect to the lack of respect and reverence from those who participate in it, including but not limited to non-black participants and profiteers of the culture. So the second part of this conversation around race, blackfishing, racial ambiguity, and so on in rap and hip hop culture needs to really be focused specifically on women. And the reason for that is because this racial ambiguity and blackfishing conversation is complex and it's inherently intersectional. So firstly, it only ever concerns women who are already under so much scrutiny and pressure by the industry. Not much is ever said about this conversation around race, blackfishing, race baiting in the culture, except for as it pertains to women. And there are quite a few men in the culture who aren't black who seem to have just slid on by, whether or not it's because, you know, they grew up with certain people or whatever it is. The point is that they're there and they exist and not much is said of them. So this issue, again, around, you know, race, racial ambiguity, all of that stuff as it manifests in rap and hip hop culture is also tied inherently to desirability politics and popularity in politics. With these issues that we're addressing and discussing today being inconsistently applied. I gave the example of men in the industry, but also where there are women in and around the rap and hip hop culture and art, but they're liked and beloved, then, you know, they're problematic. You know, elements of blackfishing and race baiting and racial cosplay tend to be quite swiftly forgiven, Ariana Grande. And we find ways to still, you know, make love and support for these women in our hearts, like Christina Aguilera, like our good sister Gwen Stefani, who, you know, really have ran all up and through black culture, Miley Cyrus, in service of their careers. And because of the fact that, you know, if these women are desirable looking or they're popular, it tends to be accepted or at least carry less vim. And so with this inconsistent application of outrage and, you know, criticism, it makes it difficult for us to really point fingers and not come across as hypocritical in some cases. I believe that. I think that as consumers of this culture, we have to come to terms with the fact that we have at many points given these passes and not consistently applied the criteria. So in a nutshell, women participating in rap and hip hop culture, of course, do so against a backdrop of inherently misogynistic attitudes towards them. And this culture and the music industry as a whole is hostile and unrelenting and unforgiving towards and against women. And I wanted to pause here and link you guys to the live event we had for No Ghostwriter. You see, we've got the posters behind. It was our first ever live event in London. We had the author of The Mother Lode, 100 Women who Made Rap and Hip Hop, Clover Hope. She joined us live from the States, and we had a great discussion on the future of women in hip hop. And a large part of what we discussed was the fact that so many women are, you know, trapped in this pressure cooker of an industry and don't feel like they can be themselves or move freely. So of course, everything that I've discussed and gone through so far means that, unfortunately, this conversation we're trying to have is inherently difficult because we can't really come to a consensus on how women should support, relate to, and regard each other when there are so many intersectional issues going on. And although it suits us to imagine that all the women in the industry are nice, happy friends, you know, the music sounds better when we think all the women that we're listening to like each other. It also suits us to, you know, villainize women that ruin that illusion. One of the biggest critiques people have had of Nicki Minaj, fairly or unfairly, is that she's not supportive of women. The core reason for that is because there is this consumer expectation that women in hip hop culture are going to keep up this facade and always all be universally supportive, but privilege is still at play. And there is a little bit of a Hunger Games element in the industry as well. So because, unfortunately, women in the industry have differing amounts of privilege, and this privilege intersects across race, class, wealth, physical body type, complexion, it means that there is so much competition and struggle and stress. The fact that the largest consumers of the culture, heterosexual men, consume women in hip hop almost exclusively through the lens of desirability, it just makes this racial ambiguity conversation so hard to have, because women who are non-black, or even women who are black but are able to appear racially ambiguous, have a perceived and actual commercial advantage. And it's why aesthetic is a hugely debated issue around the culture. And check out our video on the channel around female rap is not an aesthetic. And also check out our video we did on female rap unity and why it's a scam. So the reason why it's hard is that this differing amounts of privilege that women are able to access based on their accessibility to desirability, which comes through appearing racially ambiguous, having a certain body type. The reason that's difficult to fully critique or critique without nuance is because women overall have a significantly less commercial advantage in the industry than men do. And so that access to desirability privilege is often entirely determinative of a woman rap artist's success. And that explains in part, why black consumers and artists are furious when they see this privilege in action on non-black artists, because they know how hard it is for black artists, especially darker skinned artists, female artists, to get a leg up in the industry. And so when you've got artists like Iggy Azalea, like Bad Baby, even Saweetie catapulted, Cardi catapulted to the top of the culture. But part of the reason that they're able to do that is because of their access to desirability privilege. And so because of all of that, at the core of it, again, is this issue of commercialization. Because since rap and hip hop culture has chosen cash and the bottom line over the pen and integrity, women essentially have a gun to their head when it comes to presentation of race in the culture. If they can, they do make themselves appear lighter, change their hair texture, change their makeup. And that unfortunately happens a lot of the time. And if they can't change anything about their physical appearance, then they tend to find it affects them. And you can look at some of the lyricism. For example, if you listen to Rhapsody, she's really talked about how she experiences this. Another rapper, Chica, they've also talked about how because they don't have access to that same, desirability privilege, it's caused various impediments in their career. Though at the end of the day, this issue of commercialization has made it, again, very hard for us to point fingers at people from capitalizing on racial ambiguity and race privilege in order to advance in the culture, because the fact that cash is king has removed the focus from integrity onto, is it gonna sell? And like I'll talk about in the conclusion coming up, it is gonna sell to appear racially ambiguous as a woman in rap and hip hop music and culture. So in conclusion, we have to think about what that means going forward. And that's what I'll get into now. So in conclusion, we've talked a lot in this video around race, blackfishing, racial ambiguity in the culture. And my core points are that at the end of the day, this is a very lucrative and expanding industry. And because of that, there is a more and more diverse face of people presenting and profiting from the culture. However, I've also said that if the reason why, we reject or challenge people who come into rap and hip hop culture and fraudulently misrepresent their race or bait black people by stereotyping and troping their culture, or just plain old profit from the culture without showing any respect towards it, we have to go at the heart of where integrity lies in the culture. And I have said that that lies in ghostwriting. And I've said one of the biggest losses from commercialization of the culture is ghostwriting. So in 2021, a black artist selling the rights to a non-black artist to sample their rap song means significant commercial benefit from both parties. Everyone gets a bag, but cultural preservation and integrity is not prioritized. Similarly, a black rapper selling their lyrics or writer selling their lyrics to a non-black artist to perform means a big bag, but it doesn't mean preservation of the culture. And these kinds of actions are not condemned consistently because the culture celebrates cash over quality. And because of that, we're not really looking at the rap product that's coming out. We're more concerning ourselves with the fact that someone's put something out and got a bag. So, in my view and in conclusion, so long as ghostwriting is allowed and cash is king, it's going to become increasingly more impossible, if it isn't already, to police who participates in the culture and how. And artists and fans that are calling out, race baiting, racial cosplay, blackfishing, they should remember that nothing changes until the culture changes. And when rap and hip hop culture returns to focus on integrity and authenticity and lyricism over hitting a lick, then the way the culture is consumed and commodified can change. And my argument is that there will be less demand, less of a market for all of this if we allow artists of all backgrounds to embrace what's really at the core of the culture, picking up a pen and writing your raps. Because if we start there, something so simple and fundamental will prevent us from having a culture that we feel makes a mockery of its origins and also makes a mockery of who we are as a people who embrace and consume this culture. I also wanted to make a final point before I wrap up and say, like I said earlier, ambiguity does go both ways. The benefits from some of the issues and privileges we've talked about in this video don't just benefit non-black artists, but also benefit black artists too. And I'd like to hear your opinions on that in the comments. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I really did my best to set out what I thought of my views on this. This is absolutely not to disregard or cancel out anyone's opinions. If you don't believe the things that I believe, that is absolutely fine. I still want to hear your thoughts anyway, because this culture is important to all of us. That's why you're watching this video. But please make sure that you stay respectful of other views and other people, and anyone that is hateful or intolerant or otherwise disrespectful on this channel will be blocked for life. So on that note, make sure that you follow no_ghostwriter, follow no ghostwriter on Twitter. We're breaking down rap for the rappers and putting you on to the best authentic, independent and underground hip hop. And we'll see you in the next video. Make sure you like this video, leave that comment and subscribe. I've been Blessing Mukosha, your host. Deuces, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.